Alright, so basically I've been working uh to remind this. I've been working on the model of I guess I should explain what this is. This is a model on um sort of, it's a general to particular model, which means it goes from above into specifics, which are non-important. The important part is the general part. That's why we start from there, which we will see explained later, but whatever. That's not important for now. Basically, this is a model for conversations, and it's an analysis of. It's maybe I should have thought of this before, before hitting, before hitting the record button. But essentially, this is. Hold on. Alright, what it is a model for guiding conversation, starting from the general and going to the particular. So, what? How do we even start from this? Because I haven't fully developed it. I've developed some structural bases, which I think are interesting. This isn't my original idea either. It's just a reformulation. Um, I'm sorry, it's late. But essentially, um, we would start with absolute totality because I think it's the we will start from the general to the particular. I feel like absolute totality, while um, it's not the it's not absolute totality in the sense that it encompasses uh, everything. I don't want to say synchronically, but it doesn't encompass. It's absolute totality without encompassing all perspectives. It just encapsulates the absolute totality perspective as itself. So basically, this is an analysis of the question that you can do to absolute totality, which is only one, which is anything real, and from there you get different answers. There's not a lot, since this is the primordial question, therefore there are not very much many answers. Um, as far as I believe, I put here some stuff which I think is I put some stuff here. For example, this is dubious existence. There are some answers in general in this whole model which have this terminology. I put it this clarification, I guess it is. I put it there because I feel like it's important to clarify that it's a conceptual possibility, even though I don't completely agree with the fact that it has internal logic. That is another thing. Uh, all of the positions are presupposed with internal logic, so that's important, because if not, then it's completely impossible to make absolutely anything. These two clarifications as well, of like absolute negations are discarded. So if you agnosticism isn't a position, right? You're not agnostic. You just don't have an answer for this question. That doesn't mean that you have answered the question. That just means that you rejected the question. You can reject the question by rejecting the system, but you cannot reject the question altogether. For example, atheists, reject metaphysical perspectives, but they do not reject the question: are metaphysics real? They do not reject the question structurally. They do not reject the question altogether. They reject the concept of metaphysics itself. Okay. Given these clarifications, we can start with this chart or this thing, whatever this is. It's a model, I guess. We will start with absolute totality, which is basically a question, the absolute question of reality, the basic question of reality, which is anything inherently real, or is anything real? There is no previous question after this or before this, and every question stems from this one. There is nothing that you can ask that can be preceded from this, because if you put anything before reality, then that would be reality, right? So there is nothing before something being real, because then it would be, that would be the reality, and therefore we're talking about absolute totality, like everything that is real, not just like your physical perception of reality. We're talking about everything. So basically we have three complete answers to this, which is absolute skepticism, which is anything real? No, that's the answer. Not we can't tell, because that'd be I guess a sort of agnosticism where you don't answer, and that is prohibited. This is just the answer. No to is anything real? No, nothing is real. So essentially this is an absurd proposition, but it needs to be there because it has internal consistency in its absurdism. Its internal logic is to be absurd, and therefore it justifies itself. So it has to be there, but it's a closed loop. I mean, it's both a closed loop and an open loop, because it accepts all other perceptions while discarding them all. I'm gonna have to be faster than this because there's a lot to talk about. But essentially that. Then partial reality, which essentially means some things might be real. This one is of dubious existence, because if some things are real, then it's... I had an argument for this. If some things are real, then those things that are real are logical, and that's fine. But the problem with those systems which are absurd and therefore not real, and if those systems are not real, then they can't interact with reality, and if they can interact with reality, then there is a thing about I mean, I guess you'd have an absurd object interacting with a coherent object, which isn't inherently problematic as long as absurdity is concentrated in its own particular place and interacts with reality in a way in which it shapes or it crashes with reality without imposing itself into the reality. So it stays in this bubble of incoherence, but it is a contained incoherence bubble. I'm not I'm not completely informed on whether or not this is possible. I'd have to think a bit more about this. Then there is absolute reality, where everything is real. Indeed, it's assumed real, at least. This is the basis of anyone that is, I guess, the majority of people, I'd say. But there is three, of course, extensions of this. Determinism, where everything is explainable. Just that. There's nothing else to say here. Absolute indeterminism, where everything is not explainable. So you think that a river that you cross twice is not the same river. Hell, you wouldn't even believe in a river. I think taken to its logical extreme, I guess. Maybe it's a form of absolute skepticism. This wouldn't be skepticism, though. Absolute, I guess, would just be absolute absurdity. I'm tweaking it as we go. I don't want to film this again. Um, but trust. So this is absolute indeterminism. Pretty self-explanatory. Nothing can be explained. Everything can be explained, and unknowable truth, which means some things can be explained, others are beyond human perception. Pretty understandable, I'd say. So we come from here to metaphysical perspectives. Now, it might be argued that absolute totality is just an extension of metaphysical perspective, and I would agree, up to a point. I guess this comes to the question of, can there be a reality without any rules? Like, can there be a reality that doesn't have any just completely devoid of anything, right? But yeah, I don't have an answer to that as well. That's great. That means I've really thought of this before making it. I've really thought of it, but it just I haven't thought of these particular questions. They seem unsolvable, honestly, and they might be. So who knows? Anyways. Despite the incompleteness of the model, we can still move on to the metaphysical perspectives, which only has one absolute or general question or general departure point, whatever you want to call it, which is the extent of this metaphysical system over the empirical or perceptively real, or whatever you want to call it, perspective. There would be three general attacks that you could do to this attacks, forms of replying, I guess, to this, which have internal logic as pre-established before. You'd have the there is no extent of metaphysical system over empirical, which is these two actually. We have no extent of the metaphysical system over the empirical, which we have atheism, of course. Atheism not in the sense of not believing in a god, but in the sense of not believing in anything that isn't material, which doesn't it doesn't necessarily have to be determinist, because you can not know truths, for example. Say these truths are unknowable to humans but knowable to I don't know, any other species that could conceive some answers, or maybe unknowable in general but still regulate the reality of the universe. Then you have the question of what even is metaphysics. If it's not a complete derivation from a physical system, then how can you have a metaphysical system? Whatever. Then you have the partial parallel. This actually would be just parallel metaphysical system, which would be a metaphysical system that is parallel to our reality. So it'd be like a parallel reality, basically. I put many words here because it's the closest thing that I could find, but I'm not very sure. I don't think that there is a parallel model of reality as a metaphysical element. Usually there is a metaphysical explanation for multiple realities, but not multiple metaphysical realities. I've never heard of something like that. So that's a thing. Then you have the partial extent of the metaphysical system, which can be either this would be deleted, partial original, or perpendicular. Partial original basically means from metaphysics, physics is created. The partial perpendicular means from metaphysics, or actually, yes, from metaphysics, the reality that we experience isn't created, but it can be influenced. this manifests as metaphysical interventions. And finally, total extent of metaphysical system over empirical, which is basically a form of occasionalism where nothing is actually controlled through factors of casualty, of even internal logic within the physical system. Everything is a metaphysical extension, just as occasionalism believes it to be, where God is in control of every single action that happens, and there is causality doesn't really exist. Off with the metaphysical perspective into the empirical perspective. And this is a bit shallow because I haven't developed it much. I've been very focused on the virtual aspect because I thought that that one had the most interesting ramifications. I think the main perspective, however, of this analysis is what you can do laterally, which is very interesting. You have two sub branches in which you can analyze empirical perspective. There is a compositive analysis that you can do, which basically comes from this perceptive reality that you, individual perceptive reality that you have, or, well, collective individual, or like, yes, you understand what I mean. The empirical perspective from a non-schizoid person. So basically you come from there and you build up from multiple individual instances that become a collective data set, which would be analyzed and converted into framework. And we have here the two variables: the standard framework, which is the analysis by itself as logic system, and then the data analysis, which would be just the elements. Then the mirror of this, which I find that's one of the interesting developments of this model, is the compositive analysis, and I'll explain later why they mirror, or at least why I think they mirror, which is tautological actually, but doesn't matter. We will see why they mirror. The decompositive analysis basically is the contrary to this. We have a empirical perspective of a thing, and we try to analyze what is inside, right? Basically decomposing the object into its multiple variables. I'll finish this explanation. So basically the two elements that you can have from this is the elements of the composition, the elements themselves. Think of it as particles, if you will. And then you have the Ballet logic forms, which would be the parallel of the standard frameworks, which is basically the way in which you investigate the rules in which these elements behave around themselves. As it says here, analysis of dialectical ground rules, and this one would be analysis of the elements of physics or value theories of economics. As examples, everything that is with points, it's marked like that, is means it's just examples. It's not necessarily an extension of, it's just examples that would eventually appear. And the interesting thing about this, I'm gonna get myself something to draw with. Oh, that didn't. Oh, okay. I'm gonna show that later. But basically, this replicates this in the macro scale. This is replicated here, and this is replicated here. These are the correspondence of each analysis. But the interesting part is that in this kind of analysis, you are looking for this, the elemental aspect, while in this kind of analysis, you're looking for the framework. You're interested more in the framework, in the compositive analysis, and the data is the thing that you come from to the standard framework. These, of course, have to replicate each other, but it starts from data analysis or data analysis into the framework, while the decompositive analysis is backwards. You start with a valid logic form and you get into the elemental decomposition, and then this has to, of course, start having a cycle which reinforces the view, which I thought was very interesting, but at the same time tautological, if you think about the fact that, of course, we are decomposing reality, so of course we want the elemental form of everything that we decompose, and of course we want the framework of everything that we compose. So it's basically a tautology that is completely meaningless, but at the same time kind of an interesting thought. It's you could say it's a rhetorical semiotic thought. And talking about rhetorical semiotics, what does this even mean? Great segue. Basically, I have not only compositive analysis and decompositive analysis, but at the same time lateral reformulation. What does this mean? I'm speaking very loudly. Basically, lateral reformulation is when you grab an idea and you reformulate it. It's right there. I don't know why I chose to explain it. It's very obvious. And so basically what this means is that you're reformulating not because you need to see from another perspective or another framework, but to make your meat brain understand, or someone else's meat brain understand a thing. So you'll incur in rhetorical semiotic analysis. By the way, these concepts might be completely wrong and the same concept at the same time, but I'm not sure because I haven't finished reading Saussure. But essentially, you'd use a word to signify something so the other person understands it. So if you say tree, you're trying to communicate the concept of a tree. That'd be a lateral reformulation because you're transforming. You're not actually transforming. That's not how language works technically. But you're converting the signifier into a symbol that can be understood, so the other person has as close of that signifier, which would be the tree itself is the signifier, and the symbol is the word tree that inherently has the concept of tree in it. You emit that symbol so the other person receives it and has a general conception of what you're saying as close as possible. That's why we have more specific language for stuff, but basically that's it. So this lateral formulation basically be the language would be the most direct form of this lateral formulation, where you're just trying to get this concept as precisely as possible into another person's head. Rhetorical, what I call, this is not a real term, I made it up. Rhetorical semiotics is basically conceptualizing reformulation of a system in order for someone else to understand it, which is basically what a metaphor is. So that's what it is. It's basically a metaphor, not necessarily a metaphor. Can be a metaphor, but not always a metaphor. But I cannot come up with an example of something that's not a metaphor and is at the same time a rhetorical semiotic, which is a made-up term, because I'm not functioning at my whole brain capacity right now, because it's very late. Final category. General category, and it's the longest one. Hooray! So we have the virtual perspectives, which means anything that comes after consensus reality, of course, after metaphysical reality, and doesn't necessarily play a part in reality. It's just a either possibility or a construction or destruction of reality itself. What do I mean by this? Or rather, let's go to subdivisions, because I don't know what I mean by this. I mean what I meant, and if you want a deeper analysis than that, you're gonna have to ask God himself. So we have compositive extensions and decompositive extensions, as well as diachronic extensions. You might notice that the diachronic extensions extend a little bit more, because I found them a bit more interesting than the compositive and decompositive extensions, because I feel like they've reached the final synthesis faster than compositive and decompositive extensions. That, and also I just finished this and I realized that diachronic extensions are not the only kind of extension that you can have, and you can have compositive extensions and decompositive extensions, and I haven't had time to think of what that means. So here we go. Compositive extensions I've encapsulated into presuppositions of existence, which basically means, did I explain what a virtual perspective is? So you have compositive extensions, which are presuppositions of existence. So this would be, for example, if I said, let's presuppose that God is real. That would send you into a an analysis, which I'm starting to think right now that this would send you back. This would send you back into absolute totality, because you'd have to do a compositive analysis. So basically what's happening here is that you're composing reality from this reality, but that composition of this reality presupposes the existence of a thing, which then redirects you, which is the wrong word to use, but we will get to that later, redirects you to analyzing from this perspective, which is speculative, every other perspective. And the same happens with the compositions, but backwards. You presuppose a rejection. Let's suppose that I don't know, my leg isn't real, or my legs aren't real. That is the compositive extension. It's synchronic with time right now, but so these two would be united by a synchronic element. I haven't put it here, but it'd be basically these two, basically synchronic. These two. Synchronic, whatever. You get it, you're smart. Let's go to diachronics, because this is where it gets fucked up. I mean, interesting. So, diachronic. What does that mean? Big word. It doesn't actually mean that much. It just means time. So, I thought that there was a particular difference between doing a synchronic analysis and temporal or diachronic, as I know it, analysis of virtual perspective, because projecting to the future is a form of extension, but it's neither compositive nor decompositive, because, you know, presupposing anything. Time isn't a presupposition, it's just a thing that happens. So, and the different conclusions depend on your previous beliefs of both empirical and metaphysical perspective. So we cannot really reach a conclusion building up, building down, whatever. So it's just a continuation of the... I haven't even reached the conclusions of this. Is extending a lot, but whatever. This is a long video. Extent of virtual perspectives over empirical and over metaphysical. Now I must say, this diagram is wrong again, because these would be contained within these, but I'd have to find out which of these contain these, and that's a lot of work. So that's homework for anyone who's watching this. Figure out which extents of virtual perspective over empirical fit of the extensive virtual perspectives over metaphysical. What does that mean, though? What is an extent of virtual perspective? And we will start with this one because it's the easy one and it's also the one I understand, because the other one I don't really get, or I have qualms with at least. So we will start here. Right. So we have we have a diachronic extension. What does that mean? We are seeing into the future with our presuppositions. And what can we see? Well, that depends on our perspective. In this case, we're gonna extend our virtual perspective over the empirical framework. So, on what do we see? We can see many things. We can see a total extent of the virtual perspective over the empirical. What does this mean? It means basically that we can see the virtual perspective taking precedence over the empirical perspective in the future. This is why this analysis is interesting, because a reality can impose itself over another reality. This is the interesting part of the analysis. This should be the first time, the first thing that I analyze, but whatever. Essentially, a reality from the future can impose itself into this reality, and that's what I find interesting of this analysis. So we have different kinds of extents: total, partial, and of course non-existent. Which, now that I think about it, non-existent would just mean that time isn't real, I guess. I'd have to think about that. Don't take my word for that. But essentially, we'll analyze the other two because they're well developed, I think, I'd say. Let's go with the partial, because I think it's the most understandable of them all. So, how much does this idea of the future that we have extend itself over our reality? It extends itself partially, so it doesn't take over the complete reality, it takes over a part. Say it takes over the world. It's just a thing that happens within the various of this world, which will change our reality, but not completely. Say, for example, global warming. So you can, this is an extension of the virtual perspective, which will take over a common real perspective, and essentially transform it. So it transforms variables which are internal to the perspective, to the reality itself. So we have different kinds of modifications within this framework. This, I guess it's not framework, but it's a subdivision of the framework. We have an impossible, I guess I should start with the possible, because it's the most understandable one, maybe, or the one that could create this, where we have a partial material formulation, which can come as an endless postponement of this this reformulation. For example, these are the synthesis, by the way. This is what's interesting. These are the synthesis of these thoughts, or possible synthesis. There might be more, but these are the ones that I've reached. So there is endless postponement of a partial extent of a virtual system over an empirical one, which basically means you're constantly postponing the future ad infinitum. That's basically what this means, to make it less pretentious. So an example, global warming under capitalism. Then you have salvation scenarios where the virtual perspective is eliminated from the framework, and it becomes an impossible a framework where this virtual perspective becomes impossible. So this one would morph into this one, or the inevitable one. We will see how they manifest later. And finally, an artistical critical fiction where this is possible and we should do something about it, and maybe we exaggerate it a bit so it's got more rhetorical pizzazz, and we compare it, and then again we'll be coming back to this lateral reformulation thing where we internally reformulate. But I'm not sure about that. I don't like this dialogue between these two. I'd have to think about that. Maybe this is a subsection of that, but whatever. Then we have the inevitable, which is a partial material reformulation will happen, which is basically a localized doomsday scenario, which is basically like, I don't know, nuclear war is inevitable, for example. That's a partial reformulation of your reality, and it's inevitable, say, or at least from your perception, is inevitable. This is, of course, all perspectives, right? So, and you finally have the impossible, which is just an artistic fiction. It's impossible, and as such, it can only be an artistic fiction. Now, you might notice that I've put some little notations here. Overbuilt from empirical perspective and OVEP, these are the same. This means that if you take this framework or this sub-framework, you can go back. This is like a game. This is like Monopoly. You can go back to the empirical perspective and develop this element into the empirical perspective, because it gets subdivided as a new reality which is formed into this object, and as such you can take it from here. Of course you cannot take it from here because the metaphysical system is implied to be the same as the one that you have here, and you might say, why is that implied? And it's because we took the branch of diachronic empirical diachronic virtual extension over empirical instead of diachronic extent of virtual perspective over metaphysical. In this case, you'd have to go back to the absolute totality, but we would see that later. And also, you don't have to go back necessarily to this one. You can go back to this one. You can analyze, instead of analyzing directly in the artistical critical fiction, analyzing directly the empirical perspective, you can analyze the virtual perspective, which means you can analyze a doomsday scenario of a reality that you just artistically created without analyzing the reality itself, which is a interesting thought. It's interesting. You can find like the conclusion even if it falls within one of the syntheses here. But I haven't thought that much through, so I'm gonna just leave it there as a possibility. These are all possibilities. This is everything is both useless because there is so many possibilities, just it's bound to be completely useless, and at the same time way too useful of a model. So yeah, I this is, as said, as a complete basis. This is raw. I just finished it. It's 3 a.m. 4 a.m. actually. Wow. We have the total extent of virtual perspective over empirical. What does that mean? The future basically overtakes everything that is material, and only the metaphysical is left, which creates some interesting repercussions. We will start from the impossible, basically, which is just artistic fiction, again like the other case. Basically, we do not believe this is possible. Here is the world if it was possible, and overbuild from this should be, yes, empirical perspective. It's fine because you overbuild from here. Overbuild means basically that you can build from here back again into here. Now you might say, why is it not reformulate or any other descriptor. Why do you have to be such an asshole to make another adjective? And it's because I couldn't find an adjective that meant going from here to here without repetition. I don't mean that you have to go back. It's more like you are entering this portal to go into this portal's empirical perspective, which holds the metaphysical perspectives of the previous portal because they're untouched. Alright, so artistic fiction, inevitable is complete material reformulation, such as a doomsday scenario. Think religion, think the apocalypse of the Bible, think literally any religion that has like a day where everyone dies or goes to heaven or is saved. So those, and finally possible doomsday scenario, possible extent of virtual perspective or empirical, which basically means that there is either an endless moment, the same as the partial material reformulation, but in this case you're not postponing Earth blowing up, you're postponing the whole universe or the whole reality blowing up, except for the metaphysical system. Either that, or you have a salvation scenario where you can eliminate the possibility of the virtual perspective, which is the same as this. And finally, artistical critical fiction, where you have some extent of I guess, yeah, you have some extent of what was I gonna say? I completely shut down there. Yes, you have a criticism. Okay, you have a supposition that this will happen, but at the same time there is a reformulation of the material aspects. So it's, you have the cake and you eat it, I think. Of virtual perspectives over metaphysical reality, or metaphysical perspectives, I should say, because reality is in perspective. Basically, this is where the most problems come. We will start with the problems because they're fun, and we have total extent, which means the future is a destruction of our metaphysical world, which is either inevitable, possible, or impossible. If it's inevitable, there would be a complete metaphysical reformulation of the world, which highly dubious, because if there is no metaphysics to regulate, who watches the watchers? If the metaphysics is going to be reformulated, then who's reformulating the metaphysics? And you might say, well, a previous metaphysics. And to that I say, if you have a previous metaphysics reformulating the metaphysics, a meta-metaphysics if you will, then the meta-metaphysics will also be reformulated because they are the metaphysical system, or they're at least contained in this conception, this mind conception of metaphysical system, which is basically, it doesn't matter how many times you postpone your metaphysical totality, we are talking about metaphysical totality. We've decided to call it that because of that. So it doesn't matter how many fucking metaphysical systems you have before, eventually you're gonna hit the fact that, you know, you have to reformulate that system, that primordial system as well, and therefore this is highly dubious because there is no regulator of this metaphysical system, and as such might be impossible unless you can find a loophole. I don't know. Then you have the possible, which is a possible complete material reformulation. I should say metaphysical here, not material. metaphysical reformulation. This shouldn't be here, I think. I don't know. No, they shouldn't be that. I think this either. And basically this is somewhat dubious because the possibility, you can say there is a possibility that the metaphysical system will disappear, to which I say there is a possibility, and therefore it can disappear, therefore, but it disappearing is impossible. Oh my god, this is the I remember I was thinking about how I was going to explain it. It's a complete mess. I was thinking about how to explain it because I was trying to explain it to myself in order to understand it. And this is a mess. I'm sorry for what you're about to experience. If you haven't clicked off yet, of course, you wouldn't be hearing this if you had clicked off because it doesn't make any sense. Because, what even? Maybe we're in this reality. If you've clicked off, and you're still hearing this, you're here. So you're right there. Anyways, God. So we have an inevitable possible reality, or a possible reality that is impossible. So there is a possibility that this impossible reality happens. If this possible reality does not happen, then only actually this should be inevitable because it's impossible. Okay, so this is me from the future. I'm editing right now, and I realized that this I explained this like absolute shit. It's very simple actually. This possible reality has an inherent contradiction, and if it happens, then the reality is a contradiction and therefore impossible. And if it doesn't happen, then it's just, it wasn't actually possible in the beginning. So this reality would only be possible if the incongruent reality doesn't happen, which basically means eventually that it's impossible for this kind of reality to exist. There isn't a reality where it's possible for a complete metaphysical reformulation. So yeah, I think that argument is not completely solid though, but whatever, we'll let it slide. This is the impossible extent of virtual perspective of a metaphysical, which is just artistic fiction. So basically, the whole universe is about to like blow up, metaphysical systems included. So we have to call Superman to help us and basically stop this from happening or something like that. And that concludes the classifications. Now, this has focused mainly on a very horizontal analysis where we analyze the metaphysical perspective by itself, we analyze the empirical perspective by itself, and the virtual perspective by itself, because that's the easiest way to understand the different aspects that make up the different perspectives and absolute totality as well. But this is a thing that isn't included in the original model, but this is the thing that I thought was an interesting extension, which is we can go through these different stages in a way that is not synchronic, pertaining not to time but to perspective, which means synchronic within metaphysics, synchronic within empirical perspective, and synchronic between in the virtual perspective. We can analyze stuff diachronically, which means through these different perspectives, which basically means I didn't show this yet. I think we're gonna leave that for another day. Uh, but basically, this means that we have ideas that are coherent between each other and ideas that are incoherent within each other through the different lenses, which means basically that we can use this model not only to talk to people, which I maybe should do more instead of making this bullshit, but also we can use it to judge the internal coherent logic of a complete system of maybe I should signal this, because this, I mean, always has logic, I guess you could say, because it doesn't necessarily have to be logical, because it's just an extension. I guess if your extension is like this, then it should make sense, but if your extension is like this, then it doesn't necessarily have to make sense, because compositive extensions or decompositive extensions are presuppositions which don't necessarily have any leeway or existence in empirical or metaphysical or absolute totality, because they don't affect it, because they're post-consensus. Get it? I don't. Let's move on. So we have... Well, I want to put an example of what I mean by this, because this diachronic method, this trans perspective, if you will, maybe I should call it like that, synchronic and trans perspective. Diachronic implies time, synchronic also implies time, but at the same time I don't think it's a word that's very much used to imply necessarily time. So we will use synchronic and trans perspective. There you go. So we have one first perspective, which we are, let's say, let's grab a path from is anything real. We'll start from yes, everything is real and explainable as such. Therefore, we can draw a series of conclusions as to what our metaphysical perspectives could be, just having this as a basis. So what do I mean by this? Basically, so what systems from here make sense for a determinist? That's basically what I mean. Can a determinist be an atheist? Well, yes. Actually, it's beneficial to him to be an atheist. There is less stuff to explain. So we will keep it into the encapsulation of the possible. We are not determining paths. We're just putting out the possibilities of these syntheses to coexist. That is what we're doing. These are ideologies that can coexist. So basically, we have atheism that can coexist with determinism. It's a common case actually that it does. But can parallel metaphysical systems coexist with determinism? I'd argue no, because how do you explain something that is parallel to your reality, but at the same time you cannot analyze, because it's real, but you cannot interact with it. Therefore, determinism rejects parallel words. So this will be like this. Then implying that it goes like it kind of misses it, right? Like this. Yeah, you get it. You're smart. Anyways, then you have partial extensive metaphysical systems that are empirical. We have partial, original, and perpendicular. And you might think, well, of course, determinism wouldn't go through these, right? Because if determinism believes that it can explain everything, it cannot explain metaphysical systems, and therefore you might think, okay, therefore it's they won't allow metaphysical systems into the perspective to which one actually can reply, what if metaphysics is just a physical system connected to the physical system, but it's connected in such a way that it's explainable. However, one can refute this by saying that that's just the extension of physics, to which I have no reply. So we will miss these temporarily, unless we find a refutation. We will go around. They won't be part of a determinist system. And finally, occasionalism, which it's contrary. So these just kind of close us around. So basically, you have no choice if you're a determinist but to be an atheist. I made this whole thing out of complete. There you go. That's more succinct. No, come on. There you go. There. Beautiful. And so we can do this for all the others. But I'm not gonna, because this is already too long. I don't even... can you even upload to YouTube a video this long? I don't think so. Anyways. Oh, yeah, you can. I've seen videos of like 4 hours, 12 hours long. Yeah, you can do it. Anyways. This is a thing that can only be... I want to summarize. This is a thing that can be done through the other elements. And you can reach some somewhat interesting conclusions of what metaphysical systems are coherent with which. I leave it up to the receptor of this video's task to figure out homework. To figure out which ones those are, which connections are there. I was thinking that maybe this could overextend from here to the to the diachronics, like this, so you can do an analysis of those, but you cannot touch this. You may ask why. I am going to reply, there is way too many perspectives on empirical, or there is way too many sub-analysis and subdivisions of empirical perspective which do not exist within virtual perspectives, diachronic virtual perspectives, which ignoring artistic, of course, these are ignored, the impossible ones. But there is many. Does that make sense? All right. So what I'm basically trying to say here is that there is too many syntheses in empirical perspective, and therefore you can't really match every single one up, because you'd have like a bunch of philosophies and it'd be just a huge map, and it's completely useless in that sense. Yeah, that's basically it. I'll explain the interdisciplinary one. Fuck it, it's already way too late. Basically, the interdisciplinary thing is an analysis where this is completely disconnected from anything I was saying. We're going back to the empirical perspective. We're doing remember that the compositive analysis and the decompositive analysis are two different kind of analysis, where lateral reformulation just mediates in the middle. These are grays. I must clarify, it was right here, but I don't think I said it. These are grays, therefore the middle ground between these two is exists. There is some analysis that is closer to here. You could say that even language is a decompositive analysis, like linguistics is a decompositive analysis that is more here. You have a decompositive analysis that is more physical, and then you have a more metaphysical analysis like labor theory of value to will theory of existence, so materialism or materialist-esque pretentious, sorry, materialist desk, post-Marxian, like fuck off. But yes, essentially, the composite of this is a gray, and the interesting part about this being a gray means that we start from compositive analysis, which is at the top of all, which you could say that I am not very keen on classifying the different sciences and sub-sciences, but basically you have a philosophy here, and then the sub-science X, sub-science Y, sub-science X minus, I don't know math classifications for this kind of phenomena, but basically you have sub-classifications and sub-classifications of sciences, which eventually all come back to the main science, which is essentially philosophy. And the idea is that any cross or any explanation as to why is it so hard to find a resolution as to the concept of interdisciplinary solutions in general is because you have to work all the way like this and like this to get from this particular study to this particular study. So this is hard. This is a hard thing. Of course, we humans have developed the ability to do this because we're very smart, which is a form of lateral thinking. So you can actually kind of do this, which is this, but with a synthesis in the middle that kind of it's like a bridge. So it's like you have bridges because there's a synthesis here that is implied, whatever. I don't want to get into that. The general idea is that you gotta do this whole thing, and you can do this because you're smart ape that does smart stuff because you're smart. And then there was another conclusion to draw from this, which is that this subdivision is what's actually causing the difficulty itself of interdisciplinary analysis, because the more you subdivide, the harder it's going to be for you to come all up in the mountain and come back down. So basically bourgeois subdivision is destroying the world, and we're all going to die. We're all dead already. Determinism rules. You're bad, I'm great. I think that's all that I had to say in the record time of probably like 2 hours. I'm not checking, I can't check the time. Great. Cool. I'm gonna go eat, sleep. Bye.